Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by Lisa Rosenberg. Welcome to the room, Lisa. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's nice to have you here. I would love to start right off and talk about you being a psychotherapist. Can you give us a little bit about your career?
Well, sure. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in, a lot of women's issues, racial identity, a lot of issues that pertain to the lives of women of color. Also, have worked with adolescents, transracial adopted adults, and kids. Um, right now, my focus is kind of on developmental trauma, kind of understanding the way the traumas we've experienced in our past impact our current functioning. And I would say most of my clients are adult women in their kind of 40s and 50s, and there's a lot of processing, a lot of emotional stuff. But yeah, it's a wonderful career.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot. So, and
Yeah.
and not just that, not just being a psychotherapist, from what I understand from your bio, you also did some ballet dancing?
I did. That was my first career. Kind of, I did the usual. I trained, from the time I was about 7 years old, and all through high school. And I actually took some time off and went to college at the normal time. Like back in the 80s, they kind of you didn't go to college right after high school. When you were
Mhm.
the ballet companies wanted you when you were kind of 17 and 18 and young enough to sort of get primed for the company and learn the rep and the style. And if you went away and went to college and you tried out for a ballet company when you were in your early 20s, you were considered old by then. Or if you went to a conservatory, that usually meant in those days that maybe you hadn't gotten into a ballet company and maybe you were going to branch out into modern and other things like that. Whereas now I think we're a lot more open-minded in the ballet world. People go to college and do both, and I kind of did both, but I lied about my age and graduated from college and said I was 18 and tried to go back into the ballet world, and I did briefly. But I think once your eyes are sort of open and the ballet blinders, like I call them, are removed, you kind of can't go
Mm.
back. So I I stopped. I only danced for about 4 years after college.
Mhm.
And then I taught, and I was like, well, what do you do after, a career you've had since you've had your eye on since you were 7? And I said, well, you write, but what do you do while you're trying to be a writer? So I kind of, I had always loved people and their stories, and how we become who we are based on our past, and found my way into social work and psychotherapy. And it's a flexible enough career and lifestyle that it fits well with writing, but back in the day it fit well with being a mom and raising children. So I was able to kind of,
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to have a partner, and I was able to be a mostly home mom, and I would schedule
Mhm.
my clients in the evenings on weekends and things like that. And now that my kids are big, it kind of it makes room for writing. So
Right. I
yeah,
I can understand
that's
that.
my yeah.
So you mentioned writing.
Hmm.
Let's shine a little bit of a light on an essay that was published in Long Reads. Tell me about that.
I published a few. Which I was like, there was the one about the wrong pair, which was about my boobs, and then there was another one called Brown Girl with Bubblegum that I also published in Long Reads about, and it was kind of about racial identity, but also about the meaning of being able to blow a bubble out of bubble gum when I was 5 years old. So I don't know which of those two you're you're thinking
Well,
about?
either or, that would be great. I mean, either one you wish to
Okay.
talk a little bit more about. I would love that.
So why don't I, I don't know how old our audience is, but why don't I start with Brown Girl with Bubble Gum, which was sort of
As
like this.
long as as
Yeah.
long as there isn't any deflammatory or any
Oh no,
cursing, we're
no,
good.
no, no.
You're
Just
good.
the wrong pair. The wrong pair is about. Well, I'll tell. The wrong pair would probably be a longer-winded conversation, just because it deals with a breast reduction surgery and my feelings about my boobs as a ballet dancer, and how kind of the racial identity piece in a very white world fits into it. But that's a long conversation. But Brown
Mm,
Girl with Bubblegum is basically the story of the grail for me when I was 5 years old, was to be able to blow a bubble out of bubble gum. And every older kid I went to, I would ask them how to do it. And the thing is, it started with these ads, and there were these two very, like, it was such an American Girl thing. And the American Girl in, when I was 5, which was 1971, is like blonde, blue-eyed, riding a bicycle with her ponytails blowing in the wind, blowing a big pink bubble out of bubble gum. And I was never going to have long flowing blonde hair, but darn it, I was going to blow bubbles out of bubble gum. And I tried those little uh, dusty pink pieces of bazooka back then that came with the comic and all that. And I would try and try and try. And the Brown Girl with bubble gum is sort of like how I finally, I worked so hard, and I had, all these stumbling blocks, including a bully who told me my tongue was too small and it would never happen for me. Um, and I got excluded from a game with the big kids. And I thought, well, if I could blow a bubble with bubble gum, I would just, then they would see I'm one of them. And
right.
it didn't have to do with being white, but there was something about being a member. And when I finally did it, I was on the beach at Chappaquiddick, like 2 years after Senator Kennedy and Mary Jo Petney went up the bridge. And so and on the beach of Chappaquiddick, I blew a bubble, and it sailed through the air, landed in the sand, but it was still a bubble, and it was proof. And I saved it. My mom wrapped it in an alligator plastic bag, and I saved that bubble, and it just meant something big to me, membership in American girlhood. So that was what that
Mm.
essay was about. And then I went up to every adult I saw, and I was like, hey, guess what happened at Chappaquiddick? And people were like, are you kidding me? You told this little kid what happened with the story of Mary Jo Kopechne and Ted Kennedy, and how they went off the bridge. But that was that essay, and I don't know if that's the one you
Right.
meant, but it yeah.
Right. Well, you your psychology and what you try to do as far as development and for women of color
Mm-hmm.
and everything, I think that's commendable. You see a lot of things that of different cultures, people,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, go through.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Sure.
Native American. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they are probably the most overlooked
Mm-hmm.
individuals that have struggled since the time of, you know what I mean, of colonization.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just to point out, my awesome assistant is also Native
Mm-hmm.
American, and she
Mm-hmm.
is phenomenal,
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And women in general, we all struggle so much.
Mm-hmm.
And with that reference, I would
Yeah.
love for you to tell us a little bit or a lot about Embers on the Wind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the main character of Embers on the Wind is this house, Whitaker House, which was a safe house. It was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and freedom-seeking, formerly enslaved African Americans passed through the root cellar on the way to Canada. The house is based on a house that was owned by my stepfather-in-law. I mean, sorry, by my father-in-law, not my stepfather, by my father-in-law. And and it was supposedly haunted by a ghost of a woman who'd been a freedom seeker who had died in the house. And I never met the ghost, but I always thought about her and what would she think of me, this 21st century Black woman. So the book is about formerly a former stop on the Underground Railroad, this house that is now a 21st century Airbnb and vacation home. And something in the house calls to African American women to come and kind of reconnect somehow with the spirits of, of freedom seeking women who did not make it to Canada, who didn't make it any further than this house and perished on the grounds. It's a novel in linked stories. And it addresses a lot of different issues of motherhood, especially, and the notion, the legacy of Black mothers in this country, and how our ties to our children were seen as so as fragile enough that your child could be sold away from you,
Mm.
not respected. It was a business arrangement, and the love of mothers was just discounted.
Right.
And there are so Embers on the Wind is set largely in the 21st century, also a little bit in the 80s and 90s, 1980s, 1990s, but there's also a section in 1850 where Clementine and her friend Little Annie, who she's seen 6 of her sons sold away, and Clementine is pregnant with the child of her enslaver. And at a certain point in the story, Clementine, as she's giving birth, will kind of have a mind meld experience with a 21st century psychologist named Galen, who's at the house for Memorial Day weekend. And the present and the past kind of merge in sort of a terrifying. Yeah, I didn't think of it as a ghost story. I didn't think of it as scary, but there are ghosts who touch living modern people, and there's something about that is chilling, that we've come so far in
Mm.
some ways, and yet we haven't, because for example, Galen
Mm.
is married to a white man. They have a very, very light-skinned baby, and there's an awareness when she kind of walks with her fancy stroller through the streets of Brooklyn. Will someone think she's not the mother? Will someone question her connection to her own child? And there are a lot of questions like that in the book. There are there are women who have dealt with trauma in the Berkshires for one reason or another, and have to return to kind of the scene to, there's one therapist in the book named Calliope who is kind of very spiritual and, works with the body. She brings her clients to a women's kind of dance-a-thon to kind of, reconnect with the body. And she sends Michelle, who is a client who was sexually abused as a child, she sends her back to the scene,
Oh.
back to the mountains, to the Berkshire Mountains where it happened,
Mhm.
to kind of pose for a life drawing class and
Right.
reclaim her body, reclaim the narrative, reclaim the mountains for herself. So there's a lot of this stuff, and she actually winds up at the house too at a seance with her girlfriend. So there are a lot of pieces, but the main character is kind of history, this house, and Black womanhood, Black motherhood. Um,
Right.
yeah. So, and I wrote it thinking about the relationship between this ghost and myself,
Yeah.
and what would she think of me.
Ah.
I have all these privileges. I'm in the house with, my husband is white and Jewish, and so is his family. And at the time, we would go all the time. The house is now sold, but we used to
Mhm.
go with my children, and I would be the only Black adult woman there. And I would kind of go downstairs at night and think, hey, is this ghost somewhere in the rafters? And am I thought like maybe she'll connect with me and say, hey, so how did it all turn out? All that stuff I fought for,
Right.
how did it all turn out? And we could talk, I had this fantasy, like I could say, like, look, things are good. I've got all this stuff and I'm here as a member of the family. And, I was, pregnant a number of times in that house. And I remember, ordering my husband around, can you get me this? Can you get me that? And what would she think of that? But then would she wonder, I always would think, okay, so, and then where are the other Black people? Are you the only
Yeah.
one who's, so what is lost? We've arrived here in this kind of, or at least I'm in this 21st century place where
Mm,
I have what I need. I have freedom. And yet, do I worry that someone is going to question that my light-skinned son, it belongs to me, and
right.
is someone going to judge me, unless I'm talking, are they going to believe that I don't belong where I live? Do I have to be extra careful and teach my son not to wear a hood when he's hanging out at the mall with his
Mm.
friends? Like, all of these little things, so that have we arrived? And there's a thread that goes through all the stories, is kind of almost,
I
almost.
if I may,
Yeah, of course.
I don't think we have arrived, to be honest with you, because if you
Mm-hmm.
actually look at what's going
Yeah.
on in a lot of states and how
Mm-hmm.
we're backpedaling, not just on racial
Oh,
rights,
yeah.
women's
Mm-hmm.
rights. Seriously.
I think,
Uh,
absolutely. But that almost is like an illusion. Like, there are moments where you're like, I'm here. And then,
mhm,
for example, there's one scene where Kay, who is another affluent Black woman, she is chasing after another woman to kind of warn her about something that's happened, and a vision she's had about her. And she slips in the dirt, and she's got this posh $3 million brownstone, and she slips in the street, smudges her coat, and she's sitting in the street, and the realtor who sold her $3 million brownstone steps over her with another couple,
mm,
snorts, and says, "Oh, we hardly ever see that sort of thing in this neighborhood." And instantly, so what you're saying, no, we haven't, because all it takes is a smudge on her coat, and
mhm,
she is no higher than if she had been enslaved.
yes.
So, like, she lost, it's so tenuous. In other words, whatever where we've arrived, is an illusion. Sometimes it's not even an illusion. As
Right.
we learned today, an 11-year-old boy called the police, and his mother told him, call the police. This is just saw this in the paper. I don't know if
Uh,
you saw it today. He was 11 years old. An ex-boyfriend of his mother's showed up, violent. The mother said, please call the police. The little boy called the police, and he opens the door. Basically, the cop shoots him, even though he did everything.
oh
He
my
had his
god.
hands up, and he survived. He was released, but only by a miracle, because he was shot in the chest. So it's
Yeah.
like
There
that happens every day. So
yes.
where exactly have we arrived? Right. I
I
do
in my
absolutely agree with
opinion
you.
In
Mm-hmm.
my honest opinion, I don't think
Yeah.
we have. If you watch
Mm-hmm.
news and you see
Right.
where some southern states are trying to change their rights to
Mm-hmm.
take, rights of Black men and women away,
Mm-hmm.
I
Absolutely.
don't
Yeah.
my brain just can't fathom.
Mm-hmm.
I sit back and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, we're taking 100 steps back in rights of you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It
Yeah.
makes no sense to me, and again,
Mm-hmm.
we already know about women rights, about how those are so diminishing now. You can probably tell
Absolutely.
where I probably given my whole political views here,
But
right?
that's,
On that statement.
right. And so if you
Mm,
look at my background and the way I talk, and the way I talk like this, remember, so
mhm.
I came up through the ballet world, where,
Yeah,
if someone yells at you in Russian, you nod your head and try your best to do. Well, I don't speak Russian. You nod your head to authority, no matter what gender or color
right.
authority is. And then finding my voice as a therapist, there
Mhm.
are times, as a therapist, I one of the first things you learn is, you don't express your judgment. You don't tell
Yeah.
people what to do. You allow them to find their own answers by saying, I wonder what that was like. Tell me more
Mhm.
about that. I'm hearing you say, you reflect that. So, there are clients I've been seeing for, 20 years, and they know me very well. And I do use humor in my practice. And I'm like, come on, I know you better than that. I'll be myself, but
Mhm.
I do have to put things in an artful way, especially if I've done, I don't have any couples right now, but I've done a lot of family therapy and couples therapy. And I know if you lead in with a blanket statement or a judgment or an opinion, someone's going to shut down and stonewall you, and
Yeah.
you're not going to get very far in the conversation. So I think different people have different roles, but if I can communicate in a way that people can see this is really a problem, I've gotten reviews on my book, from Black women saying, yes, this is what I go through every damn day. And then I've also had a lot, like a shocking number of reviews from white readers,
Mhm.
mostly women, of course, because
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't see a lot of men writing reviews on Goodreads, but a
Right.
lot of reviews from white women saying, I have never thought about white privilege in this way before. And I
Mhm.
didn't set out to write a book about white privilege that spoon feeds a white person like what this means. And that's
Mhm.
not what I did. Remember, the first woman I ever loved, and the woman I've loved most of my entire life, was my mother, who is white, and
Mhm.
but also who parented in this way that, like, white moms of Black kids in the 60s parented, like, I always say, parenting with their elbows, like, who's a racist? Get out of my kid's way. Like,
Yes.
they were beyond woke. So my mom had such a sense of, like, you know, anything that went wrong with me, my mom would be like, that's because they're racist. And I'd be like, can you let me learn this on your own? And if anything, I reacted the other way, like, maybe they're not, maybe. So,
Yeah.
but that said, the way I describe it, and maybe I describe it from a place of class privilege,
Mhm.
from class privilege, what a woman with a $3 million brownstone with a smudge on her coat is suddenly homeless in the eyes of the realtor who sold her the brownstone. And, like, there are a lot of women who, there are a lot of white women who can't afford $3 million brownstones. But to
Mhm.
see, thinking of somebody Black as privileged, and boom, it's gone in the blink of an eye because of her race. That
Mhm.
people see it. That is something that, it's a comment that I've seen a lot. This
Right.
book kind of it sneaks up on you. I can't speak for what it would be like to be white reading this book, since I wrote it and I'm
Yeah.
Black. Um, but to to read it, I think it's got, like, the frog in the frying pan approach
Right.
to, oh boy, you're identifying with this woman because she's got a brownstone, I've got a brownstone, she lives in Park Slope, I live in Park Slope, her kids go to Taekwondo, so do mine. Oh, her realtor thinks she's homeless.
Yeah.
And
But
so, like, it's a different, yeah,
you have
and
a
it's, as
unique
opposed to
perspective.
yeah,
Yeah,
as
you
opposed to
have a
being
unique
confrontational. Yeah, sorry.
right. You have a
Mhm.
unique perspective on it because, like I said, you said your mother was of white persuasion and your
Mhm.
husband is as well. And
Mhm.
so you get to see
Yeah.
the world maybe more on what theirs, but then being a black woman, you
Mhm.
can understand the stereotype and why
Mhm.
it's
Sure.
so damning
And
to
I live it. And I
yes,
live it. I don't
yes,
just understand it. I live
yes.
it.
Yes,
And then the other
exactly
thing,
what I was saying,
yeah.
but it
Sure,
not
sure, sure.
as yeah.
And the other thing, and the other thing, I'm also Jewish. And
Yes.
my mom was Jewish, and my mom grew
Mhm,
up Jewish in this country at a time where many of her teachers protected her by pretending she wasn't, because she
right.
was Jewish at a time where, it was the early 30s, growing up in Chicago in a neighborhood that had a large German population. She was beaten up. My dad grew up on the south side of Chicago around the same time, and my mom got beaten up for what she was more times
Mm,
than my dad ever did. So
yeah,
they had that uniting them. My husband is also Jewish, so it's not that their whiteness. And I know there are plenty of white people who do not consider Jews white, and so it's a different. And I think so. In Embers on the Wind, Kay's husband is Jewish, and also Maxine, a different character, is also Jewish, and they experience whiteness differently. in
Yeah.
a different way. Like even Maxine notices like the Connecticut blonde family, they come waltzing into her Airbnb, and she has this sense of like Maxine had been blonde, but it was always an apologetic kind of bottle blonde. It was different from the Connecticut blonde. Like it's just like a different experience of it. And also Andy believes that he gets a pass because his ancestors never enslaved anybody. They came in the early 20th century to escape the pogroms in Russia. So it's like it's a different white.
Right.
And which is, but it's all complicated. And I don't address it a lot in Embers. I address it more, I think, in the book I'm working on now, which I'm not allowed to talk
Okay.
about.
But
But
had a different
yeah,
question set,
yeah, okay,
available here, but we've kind of went over our time,
okay,
but I don't wanna let you go quite yet, if you don't mind.
sure.
Um, just be simply because the book has so
Hmm.
much depth. It really does. It has so much depth, and I think
Thank
it's
you.
very relevant in today. Well, it would have been, relevant 10, 12, 15 years ago as well, or even sooner or later in our lives.
Hmm.
But now because of everything that you see, so much more so. Or maybe because it's social
Yeah.
media. Social media
Social
does put a
media,
yes,
yeah,
puts a bigger spotlight on these issues, and it's you just can't get
sure.
away from it. You can't bury your
we
head in the
all
sand
have
from it.
we all have a constant audience, and we all are
Yes.
constantly a member of somebody else's audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, based on your book, and let me hold on, I get wrong mouse, 3 computers in here, wrong mouse.
Okay. I
Embers
thought
of
you were doing the reading glasses thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 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 it's,
Not
getting
yet.
close to that, but no.
Yeah.
Over 50 now. Embers of the Wind is the book for anyone who is a
On the wind.
yeah, on the Wind, sorry, my
Embers on the wind.
apologies.
No, that's sure.
Embers on the Wind is the book, and it talks a lot about, what we were just talking about with the race and have we moved ahead, and I think
Hmm.
that that's very it just to me speaks to volumes to me, and you say you have another book coming. Based on today's and even your work as a psychologist of what you do you think that you would touch base with this type of book again to reach out and help more
No.
along that
I mean, no,
no. Okay.
that's a qualified no. That's a
Okay.
qualified no, because I think here's the thing, to keep yourself doing this as a writer,
Mhm.
you need story, and the emphasis is the story, and the for me personally, and the statement and the politics comes out of the story itself. So I think this one I could do a little bit differently because it was kind of linked stories.
Mhm.
But having a character arc like the one that I am actually just outlined and just started writing, it's there's so I can see the potential. There's so much to say about race and privilege, and who has the right to parent which child, and um but that's not my focus. The one that I sent to my agent, which it also focuses on, I mean, the whole crux of it is a white mother a white mother chooses not to parent a child because of his skin color.
Hmm.
And she's 17 years old, so she probably doesn't have it in her to parent anyway, but like there's I'm not going to not write about race.
Right.
That's
Well,
I'm not going to not
I think
and
you have
right.
2 elegant I'm sorry, excuse me. I
Hmm.
think you have too elegant of a voice as far as your writing to
Thank you.
not talk about it. It really because
Yeah.
you have given not only empowerment
Hmm.
to women of color, but women in general,
Mm,
and that takes a talent to do.
I
So,
appreciate that.
well, I wouldn't say
So,
it if I didn't mean
right.
it, but
My next
I
the next one, the one that's done, and if that one comes out next, because it's unsubmitted, um is it has a male protagonist, but I
Mhm,
think it still fits.
right.
It has
I
a
wish I
manual.
had I
Yeah.
wish I had a lot more time
Yeah, I wish we
'cause
could I know.
yeah,
But
'cause
you have the editing button, thank goodness.
oh,
So,
well, yeah.
that would
That's alright.
wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
I wanna thank you so much for being on tonight. I really do
Thank
appreciate
you
you
so
coming and
much for
speaking.
having me, Eri, and I look forward to watching more of your episodes.
Oh, well, thank you so
I really
much.
appreciate the work you do.
Well, thank you very much for that. Just so that my audience knows, we have done these little bit of Amazon deals, and we're getting ready to go into summer, guys, and I found a
Mhm.
really cool one. This is a Blackstone 1984 origin. I mean, sorry, it says a 1984 original style. It's 36 inches, shelf sidewall, magnet strip, heavy duty, flat top griddle station. The one thing I picked,
Oh.
because guys, I know, right? The
I was
one
like,
thing
"What
I
does it
picked.
do?" Well, this thing sounds fabulous. What does it
Yeah,
do?
right?
I
Exactly.
thought it was like, is it a TV? Is it but
Well,
1984?
yeah,
No,
well,
it's a
it's just an
yeah.
original. It's a 36. It's supposed to be
Oh,
that day and age of format,
sure.
and it's
Mhm.
camping outdoor tailgate. It's in black,
Wow.
and here's the
Mhm.
kicker, guys. It's 43% off from $499 to 284. If you're interested, I always have the link. Then I always
Mm.
try to find a deal of the day that's kind of intriguing and a little interesting. And since summer's coming, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll be
Mhm.
out there grilling. Thank you
Oh,
so much
yeah.
to our guests once again. I really do
Thank
appreciate you coming
you.
with us, Lisa. Thank you to our listeners. Until
My
next time,
pleasure.
guys. Until next time, bye bye for now.